It was one of those nights when the air felt heavy with everything unsaid. Rain tapped against the window like fingers trying to wake me from a dream I didn't want to live in anymore. My name is Emily, at least it was back then. I was the kind of girl who blended into the background, quiet enough not to disturb anyone, but loud enough inside my own head to drown in my thoughts. People say family is supposed to be your refuge, your soft place to land. For me, it was the storm I couldn't escape. I remember the sound of my mother's laughter echoing from the living room while I sat alone in my room, clutching my chest because my heart was racing for no reason I could explain. I had tried to tell them before, tried to explain that something inside me was unraveling, but my cries for help were treated like background noise in their perfect little household. "You're overreacting again," my mother would sigh, eyes never leaving her phone. My father would add, "You need to toughen up, Emily. The world doesn't care about feelings." And maybe they were right. The world didn't care. But shouldn't they have? At school, I learned to hide it better. The dark circles under my eyes were easily blamed on late-night studying, and the hollow smile on my face fooled even my closest friends. The truth was simpler and far crueler. I was invisible. I could walk through the house, through the halls, through life itself, and no one would notice if I faded a little more each day. My brother Daniel was the star of the family, the charming, athletic son who could do no wrong. Every conversation revolved around him. His trophies lined the living room shelves while my artwork gathered dust in the attic. Once, when I showed my parents a sketch I was proud of, my father said, "That's nice, honey," without looking up from the newspaper. My mother smiled thinly and asked if I'd made dinner yet. That was the day I stopped showing them anything. I began to measure time in size instead of seconds. Each one was a reminder that I was still here, still unwanted, still unheard. The nights were the worst. I'd lie awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator downstairs and wonder what would happen if I simply stopped existing. Would they notice? Would my room stay the same? Would they even bother to look for me? I started writing letters. Never sent them, just poured my heart onto paper. Letters that said things like, "I'm not lazy, I'm hurting," or "I don't want attention, I want to be seen." Sometimes I burned them afterward, watching the flames devour my words faster than my family ever did. One evening, I gathered the courage to speak up again. My mother was folding laundry, my father was watching TV, and I stood there trembling, my fingers twisting the hem of my sweater. "I think something's wrong with me," I said softly. "I don't feel okay." My mother didn't even glance up. "You're fine, Emily. You just need sleep." My father changed the channel. "She wants pity," he muttered. I remember the way my stomach dropped, how my throat closed around every unspoken word. That's when I realized I could scream and no one would come running. I was a ghost in my own home. That night, I wrote a single line in my journal. "They will miss me when I'm gone." It wasn't a threat. It was a prayer. The collapse came slowly, like drowning in shallow water. I stopped eating properly, stopped caring about grades, and stopped trying to keep up appearances. One night, after yet another argument where my mother accused me of acting out for attention, I locked myself in my room and sobbed until my chest hurt. My reflection in the mirror scared me. Hollow eyes, shaking hands. A girl who didn't belong anywhere. I whispered to myself, if I disappeared, would anyone even notice? The silence that followed was my answer. So I packed a small bag. No dramatic note, no goodbye. Just a few clothes, a sketchbook, and the cash I'd saved from my part-time job. I waited until the house was asleep, then slipped out into the rain. The door closed behind me without a sound, and with it, my old life. The world outside was cold but honest. No fake smiles, no empty promises. I wandered from town to town, working in diners and convenience stores, sleeping in rooms that smelled of damp and loneliness. But out there, even in the emptiness, I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. There was no one to silence me anymore, no one to tell me my pain was inconvenient. I began sketching again during my breaks, faces of strangers who looked as lost as I once felt. In their expressions, I found pieces of myself. Slowly, I began to heal in the quiet ways that didn't need validation. The pain didn't vanish, but it stopped defining me. One night I was wiping down tables after closing when an elderly woman named Marie, who owned the diner, sat beside me. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, kid," she said. "Don't let your past decide your worth." I wanted to tell her everything, to unload the years of silence, but all I managed was a shaky, "Thank you." She patted my hand and smiled, and something shifted inside me. Maybe it was the first time someone had looked at me and seen more than a burden. From that moment, I decided that my story wouldn't end with running. It would begin with rebuilding. I started taking night classes at a nearby community college. Psychology fascinated me, understanding why people hurt others without realizing it, why silence can be deadlier than cruelty. I devoured every book I could find, worked double shifts to afford tuition, and saved every penny I earned. The more I learned, the more I realized that my parents' ignorance didn't define me. It reflected their own blindness. I was not weak for feeling deeply. I was strong for surviving what they couldn't understand. Years slipped by quietly, marked not by loneliness, but by growth. I cut my hair short, changed my style, and even altered my name on every document. Emily became Elise, a woman who owed her existence to the girl who once cried in silence. Elise was sharp, composed, and driven. She didn't need saving. She was the savior she once prayed for. I started volunteering at support centers for troubled youth, helping others find their voice when the world refused to listen. Each story reminded me of who I had been and how far I'd come, but healing is never linear. There were nights when memories clawed their way back. The sound of my mother's dismissive tone, my father's sighs, the way my brother laughed at my tears. Sometimes I'd wake up in a panic, gasping for air as if I were still trapped in that house. I'd stand before the mirror and stare at the woman I'd become, whispering to myself, "You're not her anymore. You're not invisible." And though the words helped, a part of me still longed for something, closure, maybe recognition. I wanted to face them, not out of revenge, but to prove that I existed beyond their neglect. One morning, while scrolling through an online article about a mental health fundraiser, I froze. There they were, my parents, smiling in a photo, standing under a banner that read, "Supporting Mental Health Awareness." The irony nearly made me laugh. The same people who had ignored my cries were now advocates for the cause they had once mocked. My father was listed as a keynote speaker. My mother was described as a pillar of emotional support in her community. I wanted to scream. But instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me. The universe had a cruel sense of humor, but maybe it was giving me a chance too. For years, I had rebuilt myself piece by piece, learning to live without them. Now I could finally face them, not as Emily, the broken girl they discarded, but as Elise, the woman they could never recognize. That night, I stood at my window, the city lights flickering below like stars that had fallen too close. I thought about the rain that once drowned my cries, about the silence that had shaped me. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready to return, not to seek forgiveness or revenge, but to show them what they'd lost. I traced my reflection in the glass and whispered, "You vanished to survive. Now you return to live." The girl who once begged to be seen had become the woman the world couldn't ignore, and deep in my chest, I knew the truth. They would never recognize the person they threw away, but that was exactly the justice I wanted. Years slipped by like whispers carried by the wind, but I felt each one carve me into someone new. The fragile girl who once cried herself to sleep in a darkened bedroom was gone. Elise Hart had taken her place, a woman rebuilt from ashes, one breath, one scar at a time. I had earned degrees, started my own foundation, and built a name that stood for everything I never had: strength, empathy, and voice. The Silent Voices Foundation became a haven for people who, like me, had been overlooked, dismissed, or abandoned by those who should have protected them. Ironically, I had become the kind of person my parents always wanted to brag about, just not the daughter they ever acknowledged. Success didn't come easily. I worked through nights that stretched endlessly. through moments when my past clawed at me, reminding me that self-worth didn't erase old wounds. It just learned to live above them. But every life I touched, every person who found hope in my words, helped me stitch together the parts of myself that once bled unseen. I had gone from being a silenced daughter to being a voice for hundreds. And that was enough, or so I thought, until the past came knocking, wrapped in an envelope that glittered with arrogance. The invitation arrived on a Monday, slipped into my office mail like an uninvited ghost. The gold-embossed lettering spelled out, "The Hart Family Annual Charity Gala." My eyes froze on the familiar names, Robert and Margaret Hart, my parents. They were hosting a fundraiser in support of mental health awareness. I almost laughed at the irony, but it wasn't humor that bubbled up. It was disbelief. The people who told me to toughen up, who dismissed my cries as drama, were now raising money in the name of compassion. My hands trembled as I traced their names. My family had turned my pain into their performance. For days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I told myself I didn't care, that I had outgrown them. But something deep inside me stirred, a quiet, defiant voice that whispered, "Go." It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was truth. I needed to see them see me. Not Emily, the fragile girl they left behind, but Elise, the woman their indifference created. I decided to attend. Not as a guest, but as a ghost resurrected. I wore a black gown that hugged me like armor, elegant yet commanding. My hair was swept into a smooth bun, my face framed with soft light makeup, my confidence polished to perfection. As I stood before the mirror, I barely recognized the reflection staring back at me. The timid eyes that once sought approval were gone, replaced by someone who owed nothing to anyone. "You're ready," I whispered to myself. "They'll never know what hit them." The venue was a grand hotel ballroom draped in gold and white. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across the crowd, reflecting laughter and champagne bubbles. People mingled in tailored suits and sequined gowns, their words floating in a symphony of self-importance. I walked in quietly, unnoticed at first, but heads began to turn. There was something about walking with purpose that demanded attention. I smiled politely at strangers, blending in while my heart pounded with the rhythm of buried memories. Then I saw them. My mother, poised in an ivory gown, her expression practiced to perfection, warm but hollow. My father stood beside her, a picture of success, shaking hands with donors and photographers. And Daniel, my brother, now a minor social media celebrity, was laughing loudly near the stage, his voice echoing through the room. I watched them from across the hall, their gestures so familiar yet so distant. It was like staring at characters from a play I had long since stopped performing in. As I moved through the crowd, snippets of conversation brushed past me. The Harts are such philanthropists. Their son is doing amazing things online. Their daughter, oh, I heard she moved abroad, poor thing. My lips curled into a faint smile. Their daughter. The one they forgot. I wondered if they even realized what they had lost, or if they'd erased me so completely that even my name had become inconvenient. When my turn came to check in, the organizer smiled warmly. "Ah, Dr. Elise Hart," she said, handing me a name tag. I blinked. "Excuse me? You're tonight's keynote speaker, right? Your foundation confirmed your attendance last week." My breath caught. I hadn't realized. My assistant must have accepted the booking before I noticed the host family's name. Fate, it seemed, had a dark sense of humor, and just like that, the stage was set. As I found my seat, my mother's eyes briefly swept across the room. Her gaze lingered on me for a fraction of a second, but there was no recognition. Not even a flicker. The years had changed me more than I realized. New name, new face, new life. She smiled politely, the way she might to any stranger, before turning back to her conversation. My heart didn't ache. It hardened. The evening unfolded in a blur of speeches and performances. My brother took the stage first, cracking jokes about the importance of self-care to an audience that adored him. My father followed, speaking about the family's commitment to mental health advocacy. Every word was hypocrisy wrapped in eloquence. I could feel my pulse rising, my fingers curling into fists beneath the tablecloth. These people, my people, had turned my suffering into their brand. Then it was my turn. Please welcome our guest of honor, Dr. Elise Hart, founder of the Silent Voices Foundation. Applause filled the room as I stood, smoothing the fabric of my gown. Each step toward the stage felt like walking through the past, every ignored plea, every tear, every sleepless night echoing beneath my heels. I reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and scanned the audience. My eyes locked on theirs. My mother's smile froze mid-expression. My father's hand dropped from his drink. Daniel's laughter died in his throat. They knew. Good evening, I began, my voice steady, deliberate. When I was asked to speak tonight about the importance of listening, to really listen, I thought about what it means to be unheard. A murmur rippled through the crowd. You see, sometimes silence is not peace. Sometimes it's the sound of someone slowly disappearing while the world looks away. I spoke about empathy, about how neglect can destroy a person without a single word spoken. I told the story of a young girl who cried for help, but was told to stop being dramatic. I spoke of how that girl vanished one day, not because she wanted attention, but because she wanted to survive. My voice trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of truth. The irony, I continued, is that pain can be the seed of purpose. That girl rebuilt herself, learned to give voice to others who were silenced. She found strength not in forgiveness, but in self-discovery. I paused, letting the silence settle like a confession. That girl was me. A stunned stillness blanketed the room. My mother's face had gone pale. My father's jaw tightened. My brother looked like he'd seen a ghost. For a moment, no one moved. Then came the applause, slow, uncertain at first, then thunderous. The audience stood, cheering for words they thought were inspirational. But my family couldn't clap. They just stared, frozen in a truth they could no longer escape. When I stepped down from the stage, I felt lighter, almost untethered. People crowded around me, offering praise, asking for photos, congratulating me on my courage. But I kept my focus steady, waiting for the moment I knew was coming. And then, there she was. My mother approached slowly, her hands trembling, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emily?" I turned to face her, meeting her tear-filled eyes with calm detachment. "I'm sorry," I said softly. "You must be mistaken. My name is Elise." Her lips parted, a sob catching in her throat. "It's you." "Oh my God, it's really you." I smiled faintly. "It was nice to see you, Mrs. Hart. Enjoy the rest of your evening." And with that, I walked away. Behind me, I could hear her crying. My father calling her name. My brother muttering something under his breath. But I didn't look back. The woman I had become didn't owe them her pain, her tears, or even her acknowledgement. They had turned me into a stranger long before I ever chose to become one. As I stepped outside into the cool night air, I lifted my face toward the city lights. They shimmered like silent witnesses to everything I had endured. I breathed deeply, the weight of years finally lifting from my chest. I had come full circle, not to seek revenge, but to reclaim my story. They ignored my cries for help once. Now the whole world had heard my voice, and for the first time in my life, I didn't need their recognition to feel seen. The morning after the gala felt like the aftermath of a storm. Quiet, but heavy with what had been destroyed and what could never be rebuilt. The applause from the previous night still echoed faintly in my mind, not as validation but as confirmation. I had done what I needed to do. The girl they'd erased had finally spoken, and though the world heard her, the ones who mattered most could barely breathe in the truth she delivered. I woke early, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment, and for a fleeting second, I felt peace. Then came the ache, a deep pulsing ache that no amount of success could erase. Healing, I realized, wasn't a straight line. It was a slow dance between remembering and letting go. I brewed my coffee, the smell of roasted beans grounding me in the present. Yet, my mind was elsewhere. On my mother's trembling voice, my father's frozen expression, and my brother's guilt-stricken silence. For the first time in years, I knew they were finally thinking about me, not as a burden, but as a ghost who refused to stay buried. By midday, I was at my office, a modern space with glass walls and soft lighting designed to make people feel safe. It was ironic, really. Once upon a time, I couldn't feel safe even in my own home. Now, people came to me searching for safety, for someone to listen without judgment. My assistant, Hannah, knocked gently on the door. "Dr. Hart, there's a man here to see you," she said cautiously. "He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's urgent." I frowned. "Did he give a name?" She hesitated. "He said his name is Robert Hart." The air left my lungs. My father. The name felt foreign on my tongue, like something that belonged to another life. For a moment, I considered refusing to see him. After all, hadn't he already seen enough? But something deep within me whispered, "You're ready." So I nodded. "Send him in." When he entered, I barely recognized him. His once commanding posture was gone, his broad shoulders slightly slumped, his suit creased as though he hadn't slept. His hair had turned almost entirely gray, and his eyes, those stern, unyielding eyes that once looked at me with disappointment, were soft now, almost pleading. He removed his hat and held it in his trembling hands. Emily," he began, voice cracking. Or should I say Elise? He tried to smile, but it faltered. I gestured for him to sit, my tone calm but distant. "Elise will do." He lowered himself into the chair across from me, his gaze flicking around the room, the diplomas on the wall, the framed newspaper article about my foundation, the small potted plant on my desk. "You've done well," he murmured, almost to himself. "Better than I ever expected." There was a long silence between us, thick with years of unsaid things. Finally, he met my eyes. "We didn't know," he said quietly. "We didn't understand how much you were hurting." "Your mother and I cut him off gently. "You didn't want to know." His lips parted, but no words came. I continued, my voice steady. "I begged you to listen, to see me. You called it weakness. You told me to toughen up, to stop being dramatic. Do you remember that?" His eyes filled with tears. "I do," he whispered. "And I think about it every day. I see your speeches, your interviews, and I realize what I lost, what we lost." He looked older in that moment, not just in age, but in spirit. The years of denial had hollowed him out. "Your mother hasn't stopped crying since last night," he added. "Daniel won't even talk. It's like the truth finally hit us, and we can't undo it." I folded my hands on the desk, breathing slowly. "There's nothing to undo. You can't rewrite the past just because you don't like how it ends." He nodded, shame carving deep lines into his face. "I'm sorry, Emily." The name stung. "It's Elise," I corrected softly. "Emily doesn't exist anymore." He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "Maybe not, but she was my daughter." I leaned back in my chair, studying him. "Then you should have protected her." Silence stretched between us again, heavy and suffocating. But this time I didn't feel powerless. I wasn't that frightened girl anymore. I was the woman who had built her own worth from the ruins they left behind. My father sighed deeply. "I came here because I wanted to ask if you could ever forgive us." The question hung in the air like fragile glass waiting to shatter. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the memories wash over me. The nights of loneliness, the ignored pleas, the moment I vanished. When I spoke, my voice was calm but certain. "I forgave you a long time ago." His eyes widened, relief flashing across his face. But before he could speak, I continued. "But forgiveness doesn't mean I want you back in my life. It doesn't erase what happened. It just means I've stopped letting your choices define me." He looked down at his hands, nodding slowly. "I understand," he said, though his voice trembled. "I just needed to see you, to know that you're okay." I gave him a faint smile. "I am. More than okay." For a moment, we sat there in silence, the past and present colliding in the space between us. Then he stood, placing his hat back on his head. "You've become an incredible woman, Elise. I'm proud of you," he said softly. "Even if I don't deserve to be." And with that, he turned and walked away. When the door closed, I sat there for a long time, staring at the spot he had occupied. I felt something uncoil in my chest. Not anger, not sorrow, but release. He hadn't come to fix the past. He'd come to face it, and maybe that was enough. I wasn't looking for apologies anymore. I was looking for peace, and I had finally found it. That night, I went home early. The city outside my window pulsed with life. Cars, laughter, rain. I poured myself a glass of wine, lit a single candle, and sat at my desk. The flame flickered, reflecting softly in the glass of the framed photo beside me. A picture of me at 16, holding a sketchbook, eyes full of quiet hope. I opened my journal and began to write. They silenced me once. Now the world listens. The words came easily, flowing like water from a river that had been waiting too long to move. I wrote about the girl who cried for help, the woman who rebuilt her life, and the moment she realized she no longer needed to be recognized by those who once erased her. I wrote about freedom, not the kind that comes from escape, but the kind born from forgiveness. When I looked up from the page, my reflection in the window caught my eye. The woman staring back at me was strong, poised, and unrecognizable from the frightened child I used to be. Her eyes carried stories of pain, yes, but also resilience, wisdom, and peace. For a moment I smiled. I didn't vanish to hurt them. I vanished to find myself. A few days later, an email arrived from my mother. The subject line read, "I'm sorry. I didn't open it." I didn't need to. Her apology, like my father's visit, couldn't change what was done. But it was enough to know that they finally saw what they had refused to see before. I archived the email and closed my laptop. Some stories don't need sequels. They just need to end quietly, with acceptance. That weekend, my foundation hosted a community event for young survivors of emotional neglect. As I stood on the small stage, watching faces full of hope and pain and determination, I felt a sense of purpose so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. "You are not invisible," I told them. "Your voice matters. Even when no one listens, you must keep speaking." The applause that followed wasn't for me. It was for all of us who had ever been silenced. Later, as the event wound down, I stepped outside into the twilight. The air was cool, carrying the scent of rain. A child ran past me laughing, her mother chasing after her with open arms. I smiled, not with bitterness, but with understanding. I had learned that some people never become the family you hoped for, but that doesn't mean you can't build one of your own. Family, I realized, isn't defined by blood. It's defined by those who choose to listen, to see, to care. As the last light of the day faded, I took one final look at the horizon. I thought about my old name, my old home, the girl who once begged for love. And I whispered, "You did it." I had turned my pain into purpose, my silence into strength. They might never truly know the woman I'd become, but they would never forget her either. And maybe that was the greatest revenge of all. Not to make them suffer, but to live so fully that their neglect became irrelevant. I had become someone they couldn't recognize, and someone I was finally proud to know.